Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'd like to share my recent conversation with Zoe Mayfield-Boykin. Zoe is a member of our professional degree admissions team and a repeat guest here on the ExecMBA podcast. She and I recently connected to talk about a subject that I think you're going to find really interesting: how to research professional degree programs. As always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the ExecMBA podcast so you never miss an update. Remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. Now, without further ado, here's my conversation with my admissions colleague, Zoe Mayfield-Boykin. Zoe, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Brett. It's always good to be on.
It's great to have you here. How are you doing?
Doing well. We are wrapping up 2025 here. Looking forward to 2026.
Can you believe it? It's almost 2026, which sounds so futuristic to me, by the way.
I thought 2025 is futuristic. Time is just flying.
Totally. All right. Well, I figured we have a conversation. We've talked about so many things here on the podcast: application tips, kicking off the application process, specific insights about various parts of the application process. But we haven't talked about how you research executive MBA or parts of MBA programs, these professional degree programs. And I will say for candidates, one of the biggest challenges when it comes to learning about these programs is you can't just assume that this one program is like all the other programs or vice versa. And so you have to really spend time with each school. And so I thought it would be helpful just to kind of help people orient towards, how do you do this research? What should you be thinking about? How does that sound to you?
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's a great place to start, because they are so different and there's a lot to learn across various programs.
So where do you recommend that candidates start this process?
Yeah, believe it or not, I think it might be tempting to jump in with a Google search or, a Chat GPT search of the programs that are out there. But I actually think that the best place to start is with yourself and conducting a little self-reflection. I think you got to think carefully about, what is important, and maybe spend time writing this down. What is important to you? How do you learn best based on your previous academic experiences? Are you somebody that can sit in a classroom and learns best in person? Do you like to learn online? Maybe you need a little bit of both. That lends itself to sort of what's realistic in terms of learning for you. So what is your schedule professionally? Are you someone who travels a lot for work? Maybe you have a much more flexible schedule. Maybe you work remotely. You got to think about all of those things as you are approaching your research process, because it will really help you orient your steps from there. And then some more of the practical pieces. What kind of support are you going to need? Who do you need to get involved prior to thinking about embarking on an executive MBA program? And then even more practically is just financially, what can you afford? These programs range in cost. And so really thinking about and ordering what is important to you and then gathering information along those topics is really how I recommend folks begin to approach this process.
Yeah, that's a great place to start, because it's very easy to get caught up in reading things on the internet, a lot of opinions about what you should care about and what's most important. And I think it's very easy for candidates to get lost in all of that information and kind of lose sense of what's important to them. You're going to have lots of people with very strong opinions. And I think the more you can be anchored to, well, this is what I know to be true for myself. This is what I'm looking for. How do I find a program that aligns well with my interests and my needs? I think that's a great place to start from, because it's much more affirmative, right? It's about you. It's not sort of about other people. It's about what you are looking for. And it just takes a little bit of work, a little bit of self-reflection, maybe a day or two before you charge out there to the internet. And then you have some construct. You have a framework. You have things that you're looking for from these programs, rather than sort of just researching and kind of learning as you go. So what are some of the things that people should be thinking about? You mentioned a lot of things that should be on their mind, but like when you start to drill down to the program level, what are some considerations that come to mind?
Yeah, I think there's many things that you could think about. And again, this is part of that self-reflection piece. But, one of the things that I always encourage folks who are thinking about our program here at Darden is, who is in the classroom? Who are you learning with? And that's largely driven by how we deliver the instruction here at Darden. We use the case method style of learning. It's a student-led participatory learning style where the students are really learning a lot from their peers and the contributions of those around them. And so, for folks interested in our program, I encourage them to think carefully of where where folks are professionally in terms of their years of experience. In our working professional portfolio, we have both a part-time and an executive MBA program. They differ in terms of years of experience. Executive MBA being closer to 14 years of experience on average, whereas part-time MBA is 6.5 years. And those are very different phases of where somebody is in their professional career. And you'll want to think carefully about where you are and who you can sort of be in a classroom with where that's going to challenge and push you based on where you are professionally as well as intellectually. And so, who's in the classroom is really going to matter. I'll also add that we take a general approach to the education, general disposition to the curriculum. And so, there are many programs out there that take a much more specialized approach. And so, you want to think carefully about what's important to you on that front as well, and how that's going to apply to your career. But again, going back to some of the other pieces that I think you have to start with that self-reflection is the schedule. Is it going to be hybrid? Is it going to be in person? Is it going to be in person or online? Hybrid, as I mentioned, and how does that work best for your career and the support system that you have around you?
I appreciate that. One of the points that always comes up when people talk about where they are in their career and sort of thinking about these programs is the word executive, an executive MBA. And invariably, candidates, I found this to be true in my conversation. I'm curious about yours. Candidates think of themselves as a part-time MBA student very naturally. Executive MBA, though, becomes more complicated for people because people will say, well, I'm not an executive. I'm not senior enough for that. And that word executive really throws people off. To be clear, we are not looking for only students who are executives. When we say executive, we mean a working professional schedule, kind of on the weekends with some online classes during the weeks. It's something that's designed to be done along with your job, just like our part-time MBA program. But we, again, not limited to people who are executives. We have maybe a handful of people who would describe themselves as such in the executive MBA program. By and large, most students are kind of at a midpoint in their company, a midpoint in their career. The middle 80 percentile for the executive MBA program in terms of work experience is typically around 7 years to maybe 20 years of work experience. So I always think it's important to talk about that because I think executive MBA people have a little bit to debunk or some myths to unpack around who's in the executive MBA classroom. And then the schedule, there are so many different kinds of schedules. And I think this is why your first point of thinking about what would work well for you and your commitments, right? You can do executive MBA part-time MBA programs 100% in person. You could do them hybrid, meaning a blend of in-person and virtual elements. Our executive MBA and our part-time MBA programs here at Darden are hybrid. Executive MBA is 2/3 in person, 1/3 online. Part-time MBA is 60% in person, 40% online. You can also do fully online. And so being very clear about the schedule that works well for you, and sort of thinking about what you want to experience along with your program. One of the hallmarks, Zoe, for our programs is really the sense of community, and the fact that students really get to know their classmates, which is as much about how you learn as anything. Do you want to talk a little bit more about community in these programs?
Sure. Yeah. I always share with folks that, there are certainly programs out there where you can kind of go and you're maybe checking more of a box and there's less emphasis on the folks around you. And that's great if that's what works for you and that's what you've, maybe listed as something that is important to you. That is not our program, though. Our program is, we have a strong sense of community here at Darden. It's something that differentiates us. And our students are very interested in not only coming here to make a material difference in their careers and to learn, but they're very interested in each other and developing what I would call friendships. And of course, they're building a network, but these networks are sort of underpinned by this sense of community that they have. And so, when we think about a program like ours, one of the things that you might find when you're reflecting is that you are coming here to grow your network, coming here to really make significant, maybe lifelong bonds, if you will, with folks around you, because that's ultimately what ends up happening in our program. But again, it's just one of the many ways in which we are different from other executive MBA programs. There are programs out there where you might spend less time with the folks in your cohort. It's more about just the material and the content.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And sort of getting back to what you want to get out of this experience. I think one of the common myths about professional degree programs, and we certainly get this a lot from prospective students, is that you can't have a community and do one of these program types of part-time MBA or executive MBA program. And that's just not true. It will vary by program. And it also varies as well by intention of the students in the program. To your point, one of the nice things about Darden, it's participatory discussion-based learning. All the people who've come to school here have chosen this program because they wanted to be an active participant in their learning experience, which has all sorts of implications for their engagement outside the classroom too. I think our students across these professional degree programs are very much interested in a holistic MBA experience. Yes, they're working while pursuing their degree, but they want access to clubs and organizations. We have 10 official clubs and organizations, a number of other interest groups that serve our professional degree students. They want to have an opportunity to serve as student leaders. We have the Executive MBA Student Association, the Part-Time MBA Student Association. They want to do things with their classmates outside of class. There's any number of social events that take place around weekend residencies or during the weeknights. And again, just feel like they're part of a community, the immediate community here in Roslyn, but also the broader Darden community too. And I think that's something that it's really important for people to spend some time getting to know the programs. I think this is where class visits can be really helpful, spending some time on grounds around the students. What's so interesting to me when you look at schools at the website level, so many schools sound the same, talk about the same things: community, classroom experience, incredible faculty, all these. But when you get to the school level, when you actually get in the classroom with students and see how they engage with each other, I think that's where schools can become very different from one another. What do you think about that?
I completely agree. I think the best way for someone to really, truly understand what we mean by a strong sense of community, case method style of learning, participatory learning, what that really looks like for our students is to join us on grounds for a class visit. I think that is the best way to put yourself into the shoes of a current student, either whether it's a part-time MBA student or an executive MBA student, and allows you to see folks in action, real time, how they interact with one another, how the faculty interact with students, how students interact with faculty. And it allows you to see the case method in real time. And we have opportunities throughout the year for students for prospective students to come and visit a class. Part-time MBA, we offer class visits a couple times a month. And for executive MBA, we offer class visits once a month on those executive MBA weekends. And so I really, I think there's definitely value in reading about it, joining our webinars, listening to myself or you, Brett, talk about the program, but really having students come sit in the room for a couple hours tends to be a big differentiator and really allows students to see themselves in the classroom as a prospective student.
Yeah, I think you may not necessarily have to do all those things as you're researching. I mean, for some people, it's really important for them to come because it's going to be impactful to their decision to even apply. But I do really think if you can do that before you make a decision, at least in terms of, let's say you're extended an offer of admission, you're weighing your options, I think coming and spending some time in person, there's no substitute for it. We have podcasts and webinars to Zoe's point, all these kinds of things, but there's no substitute for spending time in person. And getting to see our space here in Roslyn. It's beautiful space, the 40,000 square feet atop of the office tower. You can see 360-degree views of the capital region. Basically, take a tour. You can see everything from the National Cathedral, all the way to the U.S. Capitol, to south of the Pentagon and King Street Station, Alexandria. So all that from 30 stories up. It's worth the price, worth making the trip over, I would say. And so I want to keep on this theme of sort of myth busting for a little while here, because another thing for people to think about is also career support that's available at the schools that you're considering. And there can be some variation from school to school here. Some schools may not have a lot of resources, particularly for executive MBA students, or may only have resources to help students climb. Other schools may have a more robust suite of resources. How do you encourage candidates to think about this sort of career support part of the search process?
Yeah, I think, and at the risk of sounding a little bit like a broken record, you have to go back to what it is that you were hoping to get out of your MBA program, your working professionals program, and how you would like to get there. And for us, we do have a dedicated career team that's based here at Sands Family Grounds. They work exclusively with our working professional students, and in that work that they do with students, they provide comprehensive programming as well as networking opportunities and then one-on-one executive coaching. And so we have what I would consider like some wraparound services when it comes to career support. But I think you have to ask good questions about where it is that you would like to go, and how that career support team will help you get there.
Yeah, support for a broad variety of aspirations certainly can support students who want to switch function or industry. I think that's one of the most common misconceptions about professional degree programs is that, you can't switch function and or industry out of these programs. The answer to that is you absolutely can. But I think this is where the conversation is helpful. You can talk with admissions, you can talk with career. Some transitions are easier than others. Some may be more complicated. Depends a bit on where you're coming from, where you'd like to go, and we can really help a student think through that. The other thing that I think about when I think about career support, so there's certainly all the good work that our career team does, individual coaching, education sessions, networking events, company visits, all of that. But they also here at Darden, there's a credit bearing portion of the work that they do through the professional advancement course. And for our executive MBA students, that work continues into a 6 credit course called experiential learning that the career team is also a part of. How do you talk with candidates about this credit bearing portion of the career process here at Darden? Because this may not necessarily be something that all schools have, maybe some schools have, but something worth knowing about.
Yeah, I think when I share that portion, and when students have questions about how career support is integrated into the curriculum itself, I like to mention particularly the professional advancement course, because it is this really unique week long opportunity that allows you to sort of pause and be very intentional about how it is that you would like to spend the remainder of your program. You complete this course in the January term of the first year of the program. It's how you would like to spend your time in the program. It allows you to chart out your professional goals in short term, maybe medium term, and then maybe the longest term. Um, and it allows you, like I said, to create a plan for how you're going to get there. And so it's this really intentional time and space to allow students to think carefully about their careers, where that take stock of where they are, where they would like to go, and bridge the gap of how they are going to get there. At the end of that program, there's an opportunity for students to engage with alums who come to grounds for a series of panel discussions where you can drop in and hear about different industries that maybe you hadn't even considered prior to starting your executive MBA program. And it's a really low stakes way to just see what's out there. So even if you weren't somebody who came in with the aspirations of pivoting jobs or industry, it's just a great way to just broaden your horizons and see kind of all of the opportunities that are involved.
Yeah, I think of the professional advancement course, which all part-time MBA and executive MBA students take here at Darden. I think of it as just a tremendous opportunity to get credit for thinking about something that can be harder to find time for as a professional degree student. You have so many things competing for your time. You have your job, you have school, you have life. And then, oh, if you want to do this career thing, if you want to make a switch or climb within your company or even launch your own venture, how are you going to find time for that? Well, here at Darden, you get credit for it, not 1.5 credits through the PAC course, the professional advancement course, which all students take. And as mentioned, executive MBA students, that work continues through this experiential learning sequence. And we just had a conversation with Laura Bordoni here on the podcast not so long ago. If you're curious about that course, highly recommend that session. And so I guess something to think about as you look at schools and you're sort of thinking about career resources is what do they offer in terms of career support through their career team? You know, what's that team look like? What kind of support do they offer for various career aspirations? Are they supportive of people who want to make a career switch? Not just climb within their company, but also want to maybe change function and or industry, or maybe launch their own venture. And then the other thing to think about is there a curricular component to this? Is it built into the curriculum? Another thing to sort of think about as you weigh this out. When you sort of look at programs, so it also feels important to sort of think about what kind of opportunities there are to get outside the United States. Here at Darden, students have the opportunity to participate in a global residency as executive MBA students. There's a global elective for part-time MBA students. How do you encourage, folks to think about this part?
Yeah, I always think it's funny to say that we require our students to travel in the executive MBA program. There's certainly an opportunity to travel in the part-time MBA program because traveling is such a privilege, but it's a fantastic way just to grow your global competency as a professional, and particularly in the executive MBA program. Our global experience is a week-long course. It's a Saturday to Saturday opportunity global residency where you will travel abroad and you will immerse yourself in that culture for that week, which is really fantastic. I think when we think about the different ways in which people travel, or different programs that have global experiences, I think it's important to consider sort of the emphasis of that travel, maybe the locations upon which you will travel to. So for us, our global residencies actually span across continents, and what ends up happening is the global initiatives team will reveal the places in which students could go prior to the start of school, and executive MBA students will rank the places that they would like to go, and the trips that run are the trips that have the most interest. So you do get a say in where you would like to travel. And I think if that's something that's important to you, especially maybe there are some locations that you've never been to before, you've always been curious about, that's a great way to start thinking about the differences between programs.
Yeah, I think a big question here is to ask: is there a required global experience, or is it optional or elective? I think is one way to think about that. And so we did a nice job highlighting our offerings here at Darden. And this have really grown during my time here. I've been here for 10 and a half years. I can remember when all executive MBA students went to the same place way back when. They all went to China together, and now we're up to a point where we have maybe 9 or so locations for students to preference from. When that list is revealed in summer prior to the start of school, typically span all major continents. Some recent locations for executive MBA students include Argentina, Brazil, Finland, Estonia as one course, Ireland, Germany, had Italy in the not too distant past, Morocco, South Africa, India, Vietnam. We've had South Korea, Australia, some incredible places. And then part-time MBA students have the opportunity to participate in a global elective and join, actually, interesting enough, executive MBA students. And this would be in the fall of their second year. Part-time MBA students can do this. And they are typically, they have maybe 2 locations, 2 to 3 locations, depending on how many executive MBA global residencies are offered during that travel period. So still have some choice, maybe not quite as extensive as executive MBA students, but still have some choice. And we do see a good number of part-time MBA students choosing to participate in the global elective. And sometimes this calendar lines up and part-time MBA students may be able to do a second or even a third global course if they're interested. So that's another thing to think about. Global experience, is it required? Is it baked into the curriculum, or is it an elective opportunity? And then tuition and fees. So you mentioned cost earlier and sort of thinking about what a student can afford. But how do you encourage people to think about comparing tuition and fees across these programs? What are some things you encourage them to keep in mind?
Yeah, I think it's important to consider what's included in those tuition and fees and what you are getting, for the experience. So, for us here at Darden, if in the executive MBA program, you will have weekend residencies throughout the duration of the program, in addition to 2-week-long residencies, one at the start of the program down in Charlottesville, another at the end of the program when you're about 20 months in, to sort of bookend your experience. And then that week-long global residency that we were just speaking about. But I think what also is maybe, so that's really like the tangible, but then what are you getting maybe beyond your time as a current student? So all Darden students have access to our career services beyond their time here. So once they become graduates of the program, they can still gain access to career services, and that's something that you are investing in with your tuition and fees. So I think it's important to, when it's hard sometimes to compare these programs across programs. It's not always apples to apples, but I think it is important to get a clear understanding, sort of the nuts and bolts of what exactly you're getting for the cost of tuition and those fees.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there, to try to be very clear about what's required and what's built into the program versus what you might have to pay additionally if you wish to have an experience. A global course is a classic example of this. Some
Sure.
programs account for it, some it's something that would be an out of pocket. The other thing to look at, particularly for an executive MBA program, is lodging included. Some programs do include it because these programs are typically accommodating students who are traveling from further away. In many cases, our executive MBA students, typically about 2/3 of the students come from within about 60 miles or less of our location here in Roslyn. The other third travel from further away. Typically, we'll have 15 to maybe 17 states of residency in a typical executive MBA class. In our executive MBA program, lodging for the weekend residencies and for the lodging for the weekend residencies is included for the first year of the program when students are all taking the core curriculum, really kind of all on the same schedule. For the elective period, which is really the second year of that program, students have flexibility around making their own hotel arrangements. In addition, Zoe had mentioned the 2-week-long residencies for executive MBA students. This is also true for part-time MBA students. Lodging is included when they're down in Charlottesville. So it's interesting to sort of think about how some of these things may be accounted for in the tuition or fee structure for the program. So make sure you're sort of drilling down into those details because it can make a difference in terms of your out of pocket expenses as you're thinking about your experience. So just want to summarize some of the things that we encourage people to sort of think about. The first question, as Zoe mentioned, is kind of who's in the classroom. And where are you relative to kind of the average student or the typical student? Our goal, certainly here at Darden, given the case method learning, is to help you find a classroom where you're going to have more peers, where you're going to have more people who can meet you on your level. Not everybody at the same level where you find yourself, but where you have more people that will engage you and meet you kind of where you are. And a lot of that has to do with the learning experience here, right? This is not didactic. This is not a faculty member just talking at you. This is you engaged in an active conversation with your classmates. The second point was really around, what's the method of delivery? And we mentioned that to be fully in person, to fully online or hybrid in the case of our programs. Schedule, right? It's important. Our part-time MBA programs, the evening weeknight schedule, executive MBA, once a month, weekend residencies here in Roslyn with online class a couple nights per week. You'll see lots of different schedules out there. This is where you really have to get into the nitty gritty with the programs and make sure you understand exactly what they're going to be asking for you in terms of your time. Career support. Are there career resources? What kind of aspirations are supported? And is there a curricular component to the career support? Another consideration is around global experience. Is there a required global course? Is there an elective option? And how is that accounted for in the cost of the program? Sort of thinking about the next point around tuition and fees, and really sort of thinking about what's included, what's not included, what my out-of-pocket expenses look like, particularly if I decided to have other experiences that may not be accounted for in the tuition and fees. Classic example would be a global course, which some programs account for, other programs leave as a sort of a la carte or elective experience. So anything that you'd add to that, Zoe?
I think the one thing that I would just add is something that I wish more prospective students would know as they're thinking and researching different programs. And that is that the research process, while it should certainly start with self-reflection, it definitely goes on prior to you maybe opening an application and submitting an application. Your research doesn't actually end once you've hit submit, at least with us here at Darden. Our process, our admissions process is designed in such a way that we hope that your research will actually continue. We offer interviews by invitation only, and it's a great way for us to learn more about you as a candidate. Those interviews are conducted anonymously by a member of the admissions committee. And like I said, it's a great way for our team to learn more about you as a candidate. But this is really an opportunity for you to learn more about us as a school, as a program, what we value. And so really take advantage of that time. Those interviews are about 30 to 45 minutes in length. And you can really take advantage of that time to ask, maybe below the surface level questions that you are not able to get answers to just by reading the website. And so I would encourage you to continue your research beyond just up until you submit an application.
Yeah, it's great advice. I think the research process, your application experience is absolutely part of the research process. And I think, certainly the case here at Darden, we are trying to reflect out the culture of the program through the way we ask questions in the application, the way we engage you through that process, through the interview, if you're invited to interview. It's a great way to kind of get a sense of the personality, culture of the schools. So absolutely, you should be, still thinking and evaluating at that point. But also, you kind of think about the interview, and you mentioned the interview a couple of times here, Zoe. I think what we're really looking for in the interview, people who are excited to be at Darden. Obviously there's other things that are also on our mind, but it's always great to meet someone who's really excited to be at Darden. They're excited about this particular program. They can tell you why, and it's, sort of deeper than just, website level or just, kind of rankings or just geography, proximity, that kind of thing. Like somebody's really sort of metabolized all of this information and said, this is what's exciting to me, and it feels and resonates in a very personal way. I think that's the best kind of response to that question, and certainly something I feel like we're looking for.
Absolutely. I really appreciate when someone has taken the time both to do the self-reflection and the research. When the two come together and they realize that Darden feels like a good fit for them, it's great just to hear that in an interview.
Well, any final word of advice for our listeners? Anything you'd encourage them to think about?
I'm sure folks have heard me say this advice many times, but I encourage you to use us as a resource. We are and that can be part of your research is scheduling a one-on-one conversation with a member of the admissions committee, getting some of those questions answered, trying to understand where you are professionally, where you'd like to go, and how we can be helpful. So include us in your research is my best advice, and allow us to help you to and through the application process.
Thank you so much, Zoe. I really enjoyed this conversation, and to our listeners, hopefully this is a helpful place for you to start, and just know that we're here to support you along this journey. Our team does lots of webinars. We have in-person events. We have online events. We also have one-on-one conversations. It's a great way after you've done some research. If you have more specific questions to your particular situation, you want to talk through them with a member of our team. We have conversation availability basically every day of the week. And if you can't find a time that works with your schedule, you can always reach us at our general admissions inboxes. We'd be happy to set up a time with you because we know, sure, there's some sort of big picture sort of things that are kind of standard across the board, but everybody's situation is a little bit different. And sometimes you just want to talk with someone and kind of get into the details of your particular situation as you continue your research process. So, Zoe, thank you so much, and happy holidays.
Thank you, Brett. Happy holidays.
And that was my conversation with Zoe Mayfield Boykin, a member of our professional degree admissions team here at the Darden School of Business. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything like was covered here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's ExecMBA at darden.virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.